A health department investigation found the bacteria spread like wildfire.
The food you feed your family, is it safe?
We had purchased meat that was contaminated. I was mortified.
Food contamination is becoming alarmingly common and can sometimes kill.
He rapidly deteriorated. There was nothing they could do. His last words to me were, "Don't cry, Mommy."
Find out how to tell if your food is safe. Today, from 30 Rockefeller Plaza on The Jane Pauley Show. Do you give to what you eat every day? Calories, carbs, grams of fat. But do you ever think about safety? How safe is the food you eat?
I had no idea that she could die in 2 hours. I felt physically ill because I knew that I had purchased that meat.
The extreme pain that Alex was going through was just horrifying. I was angry at God. I was angry at the meat industry, and I was angry at our government for allowing poisonous foods to be out there.
1 in 4 Americans become ill after eating contaminated food every year. 7-year-old Savannah nearly died, but she was one of the lucky ones.
Savannah was 5 years old when she got sick. I just really thought that she just had a little flu bug. The first episode of vomiting was on a Wednesday, and then on Thursday and Friday she was just whiny and clinging. Then Saturday morning was a whole different ballgame. She started vomiting by 9 or so in the morning, and she continued to have vomiting and diarrhea all day long. Savannah was very lethargic and really not acting like herself, and so we took her to her family physician. When we first walked in, the nurse and the doctor first thought that she just had a viral bug and that she probably just needed to be rehydrated. It was probably about 45 minutes later at the most that the physician literally came running back into the room and stopped the IV immediately and said to me, "Your daughter's kidneys and liver are shutting down, and we can't take care of this here at this hospital." When we got to the University Hospital in Columbia, the physician came in and said, "I'm sure that she has hemolytic uremic syndrome." He said that, 99% of the time it's caused by ground beef. It never even crossed my mind that it could have been food poisoning. The pediatric nephrologist was very concerned about her condition, and he said that if we'd have waited even as much as 2 hours longer at home, that she might have been so far along that he could not have supported her enough for her to make it.
As you see, Savannah is a healthy 7-year-old today. There she is, and that's her dad, Shelby, and her brother, Lee. And here with me is Savannah's mother, Christy. Thankfully, Savannah doesn't remember any of those horrific 8 days in the hospital. Tell me about that first night.
The first night was absolutely horrifying. She was very scared and crying out, and I know she was in a lot of pain, but was kind of beyond the point of being able to tell me how bad she felt. She just cried and whined, and she just, of course, vomiting and diarrhea throughout the entire night, and there was absolutely nothing that they could do. There was nothing that they could give her because her kidneys and liver were both shut down, and she couldn't process medication.
What does that mean, shut down?
The kidneys were not producing urine or very little urine at that point, and she was turning yellow because her liver was not processing out the waste products that she had in her blood. And so her color was horrible. She was yellow in her eyes and yellow, her skin was yellow, and she was just miserable.
Her organs were shutting down. She was at risk of having a stroke. Or bleeding to death, and you could see evidence of that.
Her platelet count was critically low in the 2,000 to 3,000 range, and from what I've learned about this, it's supposed to be in the 150 to 300,000 range.
And the significance of that
is she was not allowed to get out of bed. She was not allowed to brush her teeth or her hair because she bled from she could have bled from everywhere. When she would cry, they were blood-tinged tears. She was in the process of losing teeth at the time, so her gums were bleeding. It was horrifying.
Did doctors give you any assurance that she would live through that first night?
Basically, when we walked in the door at the university, they told us that we were in for a very long haul and things were going to get a lot worse before they got better.
Meaning
she was at the beginning of the disease process, and they expected her to probably need dialysis and could potentially be on a very long, drawn-out process of organ failure.
At what point did you know what had caused this devastating situation?
When we first walked into the hospital, the doctor said that 99% of the time, this bacteria comes from ground meat. And he asked us to do a food recall just to see what we'd had for the last couple of weeks. And so that first night that we were there, my husband and I sat down and thought real hard about what we had eaten and decided that we'd had maybe 3 meals that had contained hamburger in the 2 weeks before she got sick. We were not an eating out kind of family, so we hadn't eaten out. And at that point, I really started to feel guilty and upset that I could have fed her something that was contaminated in our own home.
In the long run, what do you know about Savannah's health? Is she completely out of the woods, or
right now she feels really good? The first year that we were recovering from this, she fatigued right away. And I mean, she'd come home from school, she'd fall asleep in the car on the way home. And it took several months to get back to even what I would consider an average activity level after we first got home from the hospital.
All right, the question is, could Savannah's near-death experience have been prevented? What Christy learned may shock you. Next.
Closed captioning provided by
Savannah, I think, did understand that she was very sick. On the 5th or 6th day that we were there, I was laying in bed with her, and she rolled over and looked at me and said, "Mommy, I'm not going to die." And I called my husband and I said, "You've got to come back up here right now because I don't think I can do this by myself, and I need you here right now." He was there as soon as he could be.
So a little girl nearly dies of E. coli food contamination. And imagine how the investigation would commence to find out what had happened, where it came from. Well, how does that happen, Christy? Where did you find out how that contamination came into your home?
I had gone back to work, and a colleague of mine, a friend of mine at work, came to me and said, "How's Savannah doing?" Everybody was worried about her, and she said, "I've been thinking, and I wonder if it could have happened from that recall that they had of hamburger." And I said, I had no idea there had even been a recall. And so I went to my local grocery store as soon as work was done that day, carrying Savannah, who was sleeping by that time, and walked up to the manager and I said, "Have you had any meat recalls?" And she said, "Yeah, but it's been a couple of months ago." And I said, "Well, can I see those?" And she handed me a piece of paper that was a recall for the exact same E. coli that Savannah had been sick with. And my heart just went in my stomach. I mean, I literally felt ill again. And I asked her, I said, "I didn't know anything about this. How did you notify the public?" And she said, "Well, we put a recall notice at the top of the meat department where you buy your specialty cuts." And I said, "I have shopped here every week for the last couple of years, and I have never seen a recall posted anywhere." I was mortified. And so I took my little pieces of paper with me, and I went out to the car, and I called my husband, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. They just sealed it up. I know exactly where she got it. We still possibly could have even had that meat in our freezer.
So you probably purchased the ground beef, or this is what you believe happened, and it was in your freezer, and you cooked it a couple months after the recall, not knowing there had been one. and your daughter is very ill. Now, the supermarket, they know where you are. You hear from them a lot, don't you?
Yes, we have a special buyer's card or club card that we use to purchase sale items, and it gives us the best prices in the store. And a little bit after all of this, it kind of worked around in our minds, and we decided that we really felt we did have that contaminated meat or had purchased that contaminated meat. We got a hold of the company and got a list of the items that we had purchased with that club card, and it listed the exact numbers and everything of everything that we bought. And it showed that probably more than one time, definitely one time, we had purchased meat that was contaminated. And what's so frustrating is that they know my phone number, they know my address, they know my cell phone number, and they can't notify me that I have hamburger that's deadly.
Caroline Smith DeWall is the director of the Food Safety Program for the Center for Science and the Public Interest and co-author of Is Our Food Safe? What is the official policy on recall? A supermarket is not required to make a more significant attempt to notify customers?
This is a tragedy, and what's worse is it's a tragedy that's utterly preventable. The recall information that the government has isn't getting to consumers. And people like Christy need to know if meat that's in their refrigerator or freezer has been part of a recall. But because we have a voluntary recall policy...
It's voluntary.
Absolutely voluntary. And it's because our laws that we're relying on to protect us from unsafe food are actually almost 100 years old. They're out of date, and they haven't been modernized.
But when a little girl nearly dies, is there no other public health operation that springs into action to get to the source of it?
We wish there was. When a family reports an illness like this, we hope that the local health departments are jumping on it. But in fact, it's local health departments that are in charge of tracking these cases of illnesses, linking them together into outbreaks. They have to then report them to the states. Then the states report some of those on to the CDC. It's not an efficient system.
No.
We really need a single agency that's in charge.
I spoke with our local health department, and they knew about Savannah's case, and they informed me that there had been no recalls and no other illnesses associated with E. coli.
They hadn't been informed either?
They hadn't been informed. They knew nothing about the recall.
Well, it was voluntary.
Yes. And it was not posted well.
Christy and Shelby are suing the supermarket and the meat processing plant they believe are responsible for Savannah's illness. The supermarket tells us they issued press releases nationwide announcing the recall. And the meat processing plant denies that its products caused Savannah's illness. For more on her story, check out the November issue of Good Housekeeping magazine on the stands now. One of the few people who knows what Christy is going through is another mother who has been there but wasn't as lucky. We'll meet her next.
He rapidly deteriorated in condition. They determined that he had HUS, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and said that there was no cure, there was nothing they could do. His last words to me were, "Don't cry, Mommy."
The safety of our food supply is a matter of concern to everyone. For Nancy, it was a matter of life and death.
My name is Alex. I like to play. I'm special because my mom loves me. When I grow up, I want to be a paramedic because I like paramedics. I can also help sick people. My mom's name is Mommy. I love her because her has pretty hair. Alex is a great joy of a child. He was always a very healthy boy. One evening, he said his tummy hurt. And I slept with him that night because I could see he was in a lot of discomfort. So I took him to the pediatrician the very next day, and a blood count showed that there was something very seriously wrong with Alex. And we had to take him to the hospital right away. He rapidly deteriorated in condition. They determined that he had HUS, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and said that there was no cure, there was nothing they could do. I saw what was going on with his body and the devastation, and we knew his kidneys were shutting down. We knew he was having pancreatic failure. He was also at that time suffering tremors. He would just shake, and his eyes couldn't focus. They were crossing.